So a bit of negativity coming through. Industrials, though, looking strong relative to the other sectors on the JSE.
Yeah, they've had a great run. So I know that over sort of 3-year period, I think over the last 5 years, industrials have been the top performing.
That's where you should have been, actually. Hey?
Exactly. And now maybe it's time to change out. And some of the fund managers I've been speaking to saying they're rotating out of industrials into more cyclical companies, where you'll see the likes of the resource counters, some of the banks, some of the construction and building stocks coming in.
Okay, so I mean, when you look at what's happening on the industrial front, we actually keep seeing the sector outperforming and resources looking slightly depressed still.
Yes.
And it seems that the China story, 7.5% growth, is actually adding a little bit more fuel to the fire and a bit more fear into the market. Do you think that is going to wane as the year goes on?
Absolutely. I think that's why we've seen the resource stocks selling off. And it's obviously, you know, it's people think it's funny that it's they're maybe not growing at 10%, but they're only growing at 7.5% this year. The problem with China is that the data is very unreliable, and many of the people I speak to that analyze China say that getting a grip on the true state of the economy is quite difficult to do. But just from a mathematical point of view, if you drop the growth rate from 10% to 7.5%, that's a 25% reduction in the rate of growth. And especially in things like resources, which are so, China is such a big, is so influential on already, it makes sense that there is a bit of uncertainty for the outlook going forward.
So let's take a look at some companies out with results today. And starting off with Sasol, it's down just over 2%, which is quite interesting. But we saw the oil price coming under pressure. But first half headline earnings per share up 81%. These are very high numbers that have actually come through, Warren.
Absolutely. Obviously, over the period, we know that the rand did depreciate quite a bit. And I mean, there's a statistic out there. I can't exactly remember what the leverage is, but I mean, for every 10-cent move in the rand-dollar exchange rate, you have a massive divergence in the value, in the earnings and the value of the company. So Sasol is obviously highly geared to the rand-dollar exchange rate, but it's very exciting. We're seeing we're almost coming into a new era where people like the United States are going to be energy independent. And I think Sasol is going to play quite a big role in that going forward. Yeah. So for us, it's still a
lot of investments coming through in North America for Sasol.
Yes, they've obviously been buying the shale assets in Canada. They've bought 2 shale assets in Canada. We've seen the widespread discovery of shale gas in the continental USA. And natural gas prices as a result are at all-time lows. So that's an input for their technology, their coal to liquids technology or gas to liquids technology. So we're still very positive on Sasol. And judging from the comments from Christine Ramon today, she said that she expects the oil price to go higher. So that could potentially be a bonus in the short term.
Okay, so but what happens if the oil price doesn't actually go higher and we start to see it stabilize around $100 a barrel? What then?
We'd still be holding Sasol.
Would you buy at these levels still at 384?
Absolutely. We have been buying at these levels, and we're doing that because of the story that we think is unfolding with their technology in the rest of the world.
Okay, let's touch on MTN, and we heard that its rival Turkcell attempting to extort money by threatening a US lawsuit. So a bit of negative news that has actually come through with regards to MTN.
Yes, I haven't been following that story in depth, but I see that, and I think it's a bit of an opportunistic play on what's happening.
MTN is actually in positive territory today. It's up around 1%.
Yeah, I think perhaps that has more to do with geopolitical concerns in Iran, because everyone knows that they're heavily exposed there, and Syria and Yemen. So maybe that investors have thought the strike by a Israeli contingent, and perhaps the fact that Iran are starting to play ball now with nuclear inspectors may have buoyed their hopes a little bit.
Okay, but would you say MTN is a buy at this stage, 143 Rand?
We think it's a company that's got a lot of its capital expenditure behind it, and we're seeing nice, fat, juicy dividends coming through. So for people that want to hold a growing dividend going forward, we still think it's good value. Okay,
let's touch on Coal of Africa, also out with numbers today.
Yeah, basically just really progress across the board. On the one side, they have grown revenue over the comparative period from $88.3 million to $143 million. And they recently acquired or made the market aware of an acquisition called Mercado, which is what we call a blue sky project for them that they'll develop over a number of years. They've entered into what they call a definitive agreement with Roth, which is the BEE party. And what they've done is they choose to do BE at each operational entity. So they've already got their, or they're talking, they've advanced talks with BE, with Roth as with regard to putting a BE structure in place there. And then obviously the big news last year was the suspension of the water use license at the Vele colliery. They've now, they got that license lifted up or renewed, and they've basically been able to, they've said in their update, advance the memorandum of understanding that they had negotiated with Sandparks. That's now moving towards a memorandum of agreement. So very positive development for the company, because Vele is going to be one of the projects we think are going to generate a lot of cash for the company going forward.
So you think that risk is out, basically, where government and regulation has come out and said, I mean, at one point we're saying we need to see what the impact on the environment is going to be?
It's not entirely out of the mix yet. I mean, there's still obviously the threat that things could go backwards, and the company is relying very heavily on its integrity at this point, saying these are the things we're going to do to mitigate the environmental damage and the concern that Sandparks and Department of Environmental Affairs have around this project. So they're going to be closely monitored, and they need to make sure that they stick to their end of the bargain going forward.
Let's also, yeah.
That project should be delivering saleable coal by the fourth quarter of this year.
Are you buying coal of Africa by any chance, it sounds?
We have, we bought coal of Africa about 2 months ago, so we are holding coal, and we'll hold it for quite a long time.
Okay, let's also just touch on what we've been seeing on the Clover front. We know we're expecting a result out from Clover.
Yeah.
I know that it's Keith McLachlan's favourite stock.
It is. I haven't figured out why.
Do you think that it's defensive? Because he keeps talking about how defensive the stock is, but we know the big operation that they started, the Cielo Blue, with regards to you know, ensuring, yeah, exactly, cost cutting, and then also the distribution centres just being far more effective.
Yes.
Do you think that that is actually going to play in their favour?
Yes, absolutely. They said that they're moving their production facilities closer to where the farmers are, and they're obviously embarking on cost-cutting measures. I think it's a story that plays out over a number of financial periods, and I think essentially what the company is trying to do in many regards is they're trying to take, trying to be able to control purchasing power with their products. So they're trying to add value to their products. We know in products like milk, it's very homogeneous and very difficult to control the margins there. So whatever your costs are from your farmers, you pretty much have very little space to adjust the price onto consumers. So I think it's a story that's unfolding over time, but I know Keith is very bullish on that share, and maybe...
Are you buying the share?
No, not at this stage.
Okay, so let's also just look at what we've been seeing, Greece, US, what we've been seeing coming through from China as well. We touched on that briefly a little earlier. You're overall optimistic, Warren, about the future? Do you think the problems have been put to bed, in other words?
No, I don't think they've been put to bed. I mean, I was quite surprised when the market came out. I think one of the ratings, in fact it was the Institute of Finance perhaps, came out on Friday and said that the Greek situation and how it triggered the CDS.
Yeah, the International Swaps and Derivatives Association.
Oh, it was the ISDA.
Yeah.
Right, okay, so they triggered the CDS. And I understood the situation to be the whole way through this negotiation that they were trying to avoid this from happening. So all of a sudden someone pushed the button, and now apparently the CDS is triggered. So a little bit confusing there, but cautiously optimistic on how the US is looking at this stage.
But why would it actually just happen last minute though, Warren? It just sounds, as you said, I mean, this is what also my response was. Well, where's the massive response? Why aren't we having a massive meltdown on the equity front? Isn't this what we were all trying to avert?
Oh, well, I think, you know, the actual fundamental situation's just been postponed, and they've put the rescue package in place so Greece can continue to function. I would say it has been a little bit underreported on the CDS side. I thought that would have been a big factor moving markets, but it hasn't. Maybe it had to do with the announcement came out after the close of business, or close to the close of business on Friday in the US. So maybe people weren't paying attention, but it's certainly a big factor. And I think it maybe came about when hedge fund investors and some of the banks really tightened the screws and said, listen, this is a default scenario, and this insurance needs to pay up. I mean, if this insurance doesn't pay up now, you know, when is it?
Exactly. On that point, thank you very much, Warren. Great to have
Pleasure.
you on the program.